An Encounter by James Joyce. It is the second short story from his collection Dubliners, published in 1914. Written in the modernist tradition, this realist fiction is set in the early 1900s Dublin, Ireland. It is a coming-of-age story told from the limited first-person perspective of a young middle-class unnamed boy who yearns for escape and adventure amidst a dreary Dublin routine. Joyce uses Irish naturalism to nitpick and depict tiny setting details that form the larger social landscape of 20th-century Dublin life. You can click on the link in the description box to go over all the other Dubliners' stories. An Encounter begins with the young narrator who recounts how Joe Dillon introduced the Wild West to them through popular boys' magazines like the Union Jack, Pluck, and the Halfpenny Marvel. After school each day, Joe and his younger brother Leo hosted friends for games of playing Indian battles, where Joe's team always emerged victorious. The narrator, younger and more timid, preferred American detective stories, which were banned at their school. When Father Butler caught Leo with one, he harshly scolded him, calling the stories the work of some wretched fellow who writes these things for a drink. This embarrassing incident, along with Leo's confused puffy face, made the Wild West seem less appealing to the narrator who wanted real adventures. With Leo Dillon and a boy named Mahoney, the narrator decided to skip school to explore the city. They saved up sixpence each for their day and agreed to meet at the canal bridge. The narrator arrived first, followed by Mahoney, but Leo never showed. Mahoney claimed the extra money forfeit, giving them each 9 pence. As they roamed the city, Mahoney, armed with a catapult. He chased a crowd of ragged girls, brandishing his unloaded catapult and, when 2 ragged boys began, out of chivalry, to fling stones at us, the boys insulted them, calling them swaddlers. Swaddlers, because of Mahoney's cap having a cricket badge, even though both he and the narrator were Catholic. The boys watched the boats on the river and dream about running away. They crossed Dublin's River Liffey on a small ferry and wandered through the squalid streets, snacking on baked goods. Eventually, they decide to abandon their plan to visit the pigeon house because they had to be home before 4 o'clock lest our adventure should be discovered. As they head through the fields to catch a train, they encounter a peculiar old man who asks if they've read works by Thomas More, Sir Walter Scott, or Lord Lytton. The narrator pretends he has read them all. The old man talks about his youth and asks if the boys have sweethearts. The old man's liberal talk about youth, girls' beauty and sweethearts surprises the narrator. The old man talks in a repetitive rhythm and after a while, he pauses his monologue and excuses himself and walks away. After a silence of a few minutes I heard Mahoney exclaim, "I say, look what he's doing!" Mahoney exclaimed again, "I say. He's a queer old josser." The narrator suggests they use fake names, Murphy and Smith. When the old man returns, Mahoney chases after a cat, leaving the narrator alone with the strange man. The old man tells the narrator that Mahoney is a very rough boy and starts another monologue about whipping boys, expressing a disturbing desire to do so himself. The narrator waits until the old man finishes speaking, then leaves, fearing the man might seize me by the ankles. At the top of the slope, he calls out for Murphy, feeling the pseudonym offers little protection. It takes a second call for Mahoney to come running, and the narrator feels deeply grateful, realizing he ran as if to bring me aid. And I was penitent, for in my heart I had always despised him a little. Let's analyze An Encounter. The boys' discontent with the mundane and dreary life in Dublin finds an escape through American Wild West stories. They play Indian war games to express their inner longing to leave their small world. The unnamed narrator prefers the more reasoned American detective stories. These adventure tales provide an escape from their monotonous grammar school exercises. On their day out, the boys spend a significant amount of time watching ships, which symbolize escape and freedom, able to travel the world rather than being stuck in Dublin. Mahoney said it would be right skit to run away to sea on one of those big ships, and even I, looking at the high masts, saw, or imagined, the geography which had been scantily dosed to me at school gradually taking substance under my eyes. The narrator desires more than just playing Indians with his friends, he seeks real adventures. The mimic warfare of the evening became at last as wearisome to me as the routine of school in the morning because I wanted real adventures to happen to myself. Inspired by the adventure stories they read, the narrator and his friend choose the pigeon house as their adventure point for a day of skipping school. The pigeon house, built around 1760 by John Pigeon on Dublin's Southport, was initially an inn for travelers, but later became part of a power station. Tired of his school routine and the after-school war games with friends, the narrator of An Encounter decides to skip school for a day to end the tediousness of his life. As he and Mahoney explore Dublin, they encounter numerous images of monotony and repetition. The first instance is of docile horses carrying businesspeople up a hill, a blunt contrast to the wild horses of Wild West stories. Later, when they cross the river, they see everyone around them having lunch, so they sit and observe the ongoing construction, another part of the daily routine of others. Watching a sailor interest a crowd whenever the boat slightly lurches, the narrator grows bored, realizing that the sailor's performance is just another repetitive routine. The strange old man they meet also follows a routine, though it deviates from social norms. As he talks about the beauty of young girls, he seems to be repeating something he had learned by heart, reminiscent of Leo Dillon's memorized Latin recitation. This repetitive speech, while new to the narrator, is routine for the old man. When the old man's routine takes over the narrator's adventure, it becomes clear that the narrator is unprepared for peril, while the old man is comfortable directing vague threats, making the encounter disturbing. Though the narrator seeks to escape the constraints of school, his adventure leads to an uncomfortable meeting with a man obsessed with erotic novels, girlfriends, and whipping, marking him as a pervert. The man circles the boys, repeating his actions and lingering on uncomfortable topics, making the encounter tedious and distressing. He gave me the impression that he was repeating something which he had learned by heart or that, magnetized by some words of his own speech. His mind was slowly circling round and round in the same orbit. He repeated his phrases over and over again, varying them and surrounding them with his monotonous voice. The narrator's plan to escape dullness by venturing out into the world only leads him to encounter more of the same, revealing that true adventure is elusive and that the routines of life are inescapable. In An Encounter, the subtle references to paralysis and deterioration are pointed through the narrator's strict Catholic school, his monotony, and his inability to protect himself from the sexually perverted old man with decaying yellow teeth, all of which suggest a backdrop of cultural corruption and social stasis. The narrator's monotony represents his first experience of paralysis. Father Butler's harsh rebuke at school for minor infractions reveals the oppressive attitudes that hinder the boys from exploring avenues of escape. The language before the narrator's journey emphasizes this paralysis, describing his reluctant companions and the restraining influence of the school. As the boys travel across Dublin, the narrative highlights their experience of paralysis despite their attempts to break free from routine. The narrator observes docile horses and notes how he and Mahoney are shouted at for their immobility. The ragged boys and girls encountered by the narrator and Mahoney highlight the poverty of Dublin's residents at the turn of the 20th century. And Mahoney's lack of sympathy reflects the indifference of wealthier Catholics towards their poorer neighbors. The history of the Pigeon House, once an Irish inn, then an English military fort, and finally a power plant, symbolizes Dublin's decline from international connection to oppression to processing waste. Although they walk far, they fail to reach their intended destination and end up lying in a field. When the old man joins them, the narrator describes how the man's mind seems magnetized by his own words, making it difficult to change the subject, despite feeling uncomfortable. The old man's exploitation and abuse of the boy's innocence becomes increasingly inappropriate and threatening, culminating in his fantasy about whipping Mahoney. The man's circular speech paralyzes the narrator, who can only stare at the ground and listen, remaining frozen when the man abruptly walks away and presumably exposes himself. Even when the man returns and Mahoney runs after a cat, the narrator stays rooted to the ground. When the old man's perversion becomes clear and the narrator realizes he is in danger, he remains paralyzed, unable to move or defend himself until the last moment. His eventual escape, marred by a sense of shame, suggests he doesn't view it as a true departure from his paralysis. The old man's shabby appearance, good accent, perverted speech, and decaying teeth parallel the wider cultural decay. His deteriorating morals and routine trap him in a cycle of making the younger boys suffer. The fact that this admirer of famous Irish writers is himself perverted suggests a broader cultural corruption. Let's point out the important symbolism of An Encounter. It was Joe Dillon who introduced the Wild West to us. In An Encounter, the Wild West symbolizes freedom, bravery, adventures, and the allure of the unknown more than it represents its actual historical reality. The adventures related in the literature of the Wild West were remote from my nature, but, at least, they opened doors of escape. The narrator, though not naturally drawn to Wild West adventures, sees them as a means of escape from his monotonous life. Both he and Mahoney carry the spirit of these adventures as they wander through Dublin. The Wild West theme in the story highlights the narrator's mixed feelings about adventure and masculinity. He desires the mystery and heroism of the Wild West but dislikes the violence that often accompanies it. While Joe Dillon embodies the aggressive masculinity celebrated in these tales, the narrator finds no joy in such violent games. Seeking adventure away from school, the narrator prefers to avoid conflict, unlike Mahoney, who brandishes a slingshot symbolizing his aggressive masculinity. Despite Mahoney's initial show of bravado with his slingshot, he doesn't use it when faced with real danger from a strange old man whose behavior terrifies the boys more than it excites them. This encounter exposes the darker side of individualistic masculine sexuality. The weather in the story also mirrors the boys' journey. A sunny day initially represents their sense of freedom, but as the day heats up, it becomes burdensome with their encounter with the old man, reflecting the shift in their adventure's tone. The story ultimately suggests that the heroism and adventure the boys seek may be unattainable or illusory. For more videos on James Joyce's Dubliners, don't forget to like, share and subscribe.